All right. Okay. Well, Matt, thanks for joining me on the ODAT Chad podcast.
Thanks, Arlene. I'm so glad to be here.
You have such a good voice for podcasting, and you're a student in my class. So now you have your own podcast, The
I
Conscious
know.
Contact.
I'm so excited. Thanks for the voice compliment. And I'm really tickled to be doing this. I just enjoy making this so much and I really appreciate your help in making it happen.
I'm so glad you did the class because you interviewed me on your podcast, and I had probably the biggest revelation that I've had in a very long time, which was God doesn't have a to-do list for me. Wasn't that amazing?
It is. It took me a long time to get that. And I'm so glad it was helpful for you. I remember we're both in recovery and I remember that third step being such a titanic struggle for me because I really felt like that there was some specific thing on God's to-do list for me to do if I was really going to turn my will over. And it scared the
Right.
crap out of me because I thought it was going to be, something like the priesthood or the Peace Corps or something I didn't want to do.
Isn't it funny how like we have these ideas like, oh, if I turn my life over to God, what if he wants me to be an accountant?
Yeah.
It's
And I
like,
thought, by truly doing that, turning my life over, that, it was going to be like turning off Matt, and turning
right.
on Saint Matt, right? The hair shirt, locust eating, sandal wearing, self-sacrificing.
Right, live in poverty, struggle. Yeah, which is so
Absolutely.
funny because I don't, I kind of grew up with the idea that it was noble somehow to be poor and self-sacrificing, but I
And
don't
miserable
believe that.
and miserable.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do not believe that anymore. But I totally want to explore that topic. But before we do, typically what I have people do is sort of give us a little overview of their story. We talk about experience, strength, and hope a lot. So do you want to just do like 10, 15 minutes and then we'll sort of talk about your podcast, how it came to be about, and the
Yeah.
purpose of that and all? Okay,
Yeah.
great.
Perfect. Okay. So I grew up the fourth child in a family of 8 kids, very good Catholic upbringing. Um, and I was born in a really traumatic set of circumstances. So my mom and dad met after World War II in college. My dad had had a really difficult upbringing, and then my mom, who had, I think, had a pretty comfortable by comparison upbringing, and so their romance was kind of storybook. They got married and had 3 kids. At least, I mean, I wasn't there. The slides and the stories painted out to be pretty much like that. Now, my mother had a serious mental illness kick in before I was born, schizophrenia. So much so that she was actually hospitalized in a mental institution. This was in the mid to late 1950s, and receiving daily electroshock therapy and something called insulin coma therapy, where they literally injected her with enough insulin to put her in a coma, over and over and over again, thinking it would break this cycle of schizophrenia, hearing voices, etc. Um, she did improve, but they wanted her to stay there. The medical professionals, my dad disagreed, and so he had her released, and she came home. You can imagine the difficulty of raising 3 small kids, and he loved his wife and he wanted her home. Well, she was on the cutting edge medications of the time, which were better than the schizophrenia, but pretty dramatic, pretty brutal. And then anyway, about a year and a half later, I was born, and I'm assuming she was taking these while pregnant. I don't know. Um, then they had 4 more kids after me, and my mother's illness would um, abate for a year and then resurface. And about once a year, she would either leave or be hospitalized. The story was mom needed to rest. Um, and my dad, with all these kids at home, coped by drinking. And he was a guy that got angry when he drank, especially as the years went on. So, by the time I was 10, 12, or 13, um, things were, from the outside, they were pretty good. We lived in a nice home. My dad owned his own business. Um, and we always got new clothes in the fall for school. Um, but inside the house, most nights he got drunk and got mean. And many days, she would say things that, were born in schizophrenia, but either scared me or hurt me or whatever. I recognize now that they both were doing the best they could, but at the time, it was really anxiety provoking. I discovered alcohol myself at 13. There was always plenty around, so it was easy to do. And me and 2 or 3 or 4 of my buddies camped out. And I should have known from the beginning that I had a problem, because right from the get-go, when I went down to Dad's bar, I went to look for the bottles that were the fullest, so that there'd be enough for all of us to get really wasted. So my first drunk was on rum and sweet vermouth, straight from the bottle, both of them, right? And I got sick, but it was so much fun. I couldn't wait to do it again. And right from the start, every time it was drink to really intoxication, and a lot of times, to kind of passing out. I started having blackouts fairly early. I was still a teenager, but they were funny at the time. I didn't know anything about what they meant. I'd hear stories of what I'd done the next day, and I didn't remember them. And while it was a little disconcerting, it was kind of fun to be that guy, the swashbuckler or whatever. But mostly, I really liked the fact that the anxiety and the anger outbursts for me, that seemed to come out of nowhere, kind of like a Mr. Hyde, would go away when I drank. Pretty quickly, I learned that I like to get buzzed in all different kinds of ways. So I added other things to the mix. And from age 13 to probably age 20 or 21, it was mostly fun. I had some consequences, but they weren't super bad. But then pretty quickly, they started turning worse and worse. Lost my job, got evicted. I wasn't paying the rent. Got a DUI, got another DUI in the same year. And then I had some significant legal troubles. I was really bankrupt. I didn't declare literal bankruptcy at the time, but I was. And I had begun having these panic attacks. In the middle of the night, I would wake up sweating, heart pounding, and just really panicked. And I started to have sort of milder versions of those even when I was drinking. So I so much wanted to go back to the way it was, but that was gone. And instead, I was drinking by myself. When I did try to drink socially, I didn't know what to say. It was like the art of conversation had eluded me. I felt like I didn't fit in, and hangovers were getting worse. So that landed me in probation, and with a suspended sentence, and court-ordered AA meetings and some alcohol traffic offender education. And so I became aware of this thing called alcoholism. It made sense that it was what my dad had. And I started going to AA meetings and getting my slip signed. And the heat started to turn down. My probation officer was complimenting on me on the changes I was making. But inside, I really wanted to go back to drinking. And so when I got done with the probation, that's what I did. I firmly resolved that I was going to do it with more discipline, that I was going to kind of grow up and really just sort of have some simple rules to live by. Really, they were a lot of rules to drink by. And it took all my willpower to live by them. I remember one was no more than two, no more than every other day. And boy, when I was about halfway through that second one, it really was torture thinking I had to wait two more days before I could get another. In general, I stuck to the rules, but I really obsessed about drinking. It was all I could think about a lot. And when I would go ahead and break the rule and let myself drink as much as I wanted, it was like this release, this dam bursting of, not having to fight it anymore. So I did that, and I began having more of those panic attacks. And so after 9 months or a year or so of that, I had a really big one. And I wanted to die. I wanted somebody to kill me. I didn't want to do it myself, but I was so anxious and frantic. In my mind, I just was thrashing because part of me knew that I was alcoholic, that I am alcoholic, and that by continuing to drink, I was signing my death sentence. So I went out with a friend to have a drink and talk about it. And this was a guy I knew well and I'd done a lot of things with. And interestingly, he very recently now called me because he's now in the program many, many, many years later. His was a much later blooming thing, but this was in the early 80s when we sat down, and I was talking to him about how miserable I was and how scared I was and how I didn't know what to do. And I had nearly broken a relationship that had, I was engaged, and I asked him what he thought it was about. And he said, well, I really don't see how there's any question. And to me, it was one of those moments where you just know. And I had this knowing that, yes, I have this thing called alcoholism, and now what am I going to do about it? So I got into AA again and seriously, and that's been the primary foundation of my recovery since, although I've added many other things. I love the idea that my alcoholism was all encompassing and I had a lifestyle built on it. And for recovery really to be more than just a non-drinking program, then I have to have an integrated and all-encompassing nearly lifestyle of recovery now. So AA is very much still a part of it. There's much more. I think, now it sort of suffuses the very way I think. I have an active meditation practice and exercise practice. I have this network that I'm a part of, that you and I are nodes in, that's right now at this very moment supporting and fertilizing my continuing and growing recovery. And that's where the podcast came from. One of the key aspects of my recovery lifestyle, if you will, is this conscious contact, this higher power connection, this relationship with God, this presence in my life. Words seem insufficient, but I need to use them because that's the medium we're using to describe this thing. I went through so much time, and maybe we'll get to this a little bit more as we go through, but so much of my recovery walk in the early years and for a while was, what is this God thing? I knew it was a series of trying on different ideas and rejecting them. And um, then finding the beginnings, and now much more than the beginnings, of a framework that works for me. And it's born in the openness of the spiritual awakening concept that AA offers, that it's my own understanding, my own experience. And one thing I've noticed in observing people talk about theirs is that many people in recovery circles struggle with it, and often, there's either this sort of ardent, unquestioning faith, which I think is the minority, and there's a majority where it's something that they either have anxiety themselves about and don't want to talk about, or they feel like it's out of their league to even go there. And as a consequence, I think what happens is it gets put on a shelf, and a lot of people don't address it. At least that's my feeling. I don't know. Maybe I'm off with that, but I don't think so. And so what I want to do with this show called Our Conscious Contact is provide a forum for people to share their questions, to tell their stories, to reveal their own God experiences, or desire, or anxiety or frustration or whatever. I'm certain that we all have our own perfectly unique connection or potential. And I want the show to be a force for helping people find theirs.
Oh, I absolutely love that. And by the way, thank you so much for sharing your story. I was trying to be very silent and letting you, I got some feedback on my podcast. They're like, stop interrupting. So anyway, that's why I was so quiet. I think I interrupted you constantly during our first interview, but thank you so much for sharing that story. So much of what you talked about resonated with me. And I was like, nodding the whole time going, yeah, it's interesting to go back to what you said about, your mom. Yeah, mental illness was not, there wasn't like this mainstream understanding about mental illness, when we were coming up, like there is now. I think there's so many more resources. So we like grew up with like all this confusion about it. I have an older sister who had mental illness and depression and things like that, and we didn't know how to handle it. And so it sounds like your dad with the 8 kids didn't know how to handle it either. And I can't imagine how challenging that must have been for you all to have an absent mom and an angry dad who drank, right? So it's not like you're taught any coping skills. Did you guys go to church when you were growing up?
We did. We were members of a Catholic parish, and my older siblings went through the 8th grade there. They had,
Oh,
yeah, and confirmation and all that stuff. I was in Catholic school through the 4th grade, and so Mass, Monday through Friday, and then again on Sunday with the family. And then things got to be too much with 8 kids in 5 different schools, and so they consolidated. And I think probably the financial commitment was a bit much too, so we were in public schools after that. But we did continue to go to Mass, and that's where my religious introduction was, and that's where I first became really sort of disillusioned, and it was part of my fuel for
I
drinking.
wonder, oh, I'm sure. I wonder though, if you had similar experiences to me. I grew up going to a Presbyterian church, and then later, like when I was a teenager, I spent a lot of time at a Southern Baptist church. I was in California, but we went to a Baptist church, which was fun because the pastor's daughter and I smoked a lot of weed. But I had this experience feeling like I couldn't, like I kept getting this message that I was supposed to be perfect, and I was feeling miserably, obviously, because I'm human. And then I also got the message that not that just that I was, but that my feeble human mind couldn't possibly fathom the vastness of God's love. Yet at the same time, my mother, who was not, quote unquote, a believer, like she was going to go to hell. Like that didn't make any sense to me. And I thought God must love my mom at least as much as I do. And I would never allow that to happen. Right. So I was confused. I was very confused by sort of the dogma that was being spoon fed to me. Like, and then when I also found a 12-step program, it was like, oh, you can come up with your own concept. And I was like, what? That was like, that blew the doors off the whole thing, because I completely rejected religion. So, it's the baby with the bathwater thing where I threw away God too. Was that sort of your experience too?
Yeah, a little different in that, for Catholicism, the idea was that understanding I had was that, I came into this world a sinner,
Right.
tainted, and
Mm-hmm.
that Jesus died for my sins, which made no sense. I mean, it just felt like,
Sins of the father type of thing, huh?
well, yeah, that, and how could a God who's all about love, um, you know, kill his son so that we could not be burning, and that all we basically had to do was, you know, swear an oath. I mean, it just, um, it, but more so for me. I mean, I think I digested that unquestioningly for a number of years. One of the things that turned me off was I used to pray for peace in our house, that my dad would um, stop being mean, that my mother would heal, and those things didn't happen. Um, I didn't have a real thoughtful exploration of what might be going on there. I didn't even have a conscious sort of conclusion. The subconscious conclusion I came to was, this doesn't work, you
Oh,
know.
right.
So screw it.
Yeah.
And I remember later, um, when I was, when my drinking started to turn. Actually, no, it was after I began to learn about alcoholism, um, and the idea of genetics and heredity, and began doing the odds on what my future was going to look like at 20 or 21 with a schizophrenic mother and an alcoholic father. I thought, oh, I'm fucked. So, I might as well go out in a blaze of glory. The old, it's
Right.
better to burn out than it is to fade away sort of lyric. And
Right.
that rationalized, driving around in a car with no license plates because they'd been taken away for my DUI, with a bag of cocaine and a bag of weed and a 12 pack of beer in it,
Yeah.
like I had some kind of romantic outlaw idea of,
Mental. Yeah.
yeah, I was like a
Rebellious.
meteor. Yeah, that I was, blazing this comet like path through the sky. I mean, it
Right.
was really just rationalization for.
So, yeah, I mean, I think it's not an uncommon experience to, abandon religion. Like if you grew up religious and things aren't going well, to abandon it.
Well, and Arlene, I'm glad you said it that way, because I think that that's the other place that a lot of people are in recovery, is they really, where I was for a long time, and so I have empathy for it. The rejection, um, the philosophy of rejection. In other words, knowing what you're against really well and being passionately against it, but
Hmm.
not spending any time on what you do believe. I mean,
Oh, good point. Yeah,
right?
that seems to be coming up in my studies lately, like recovery stuff lately. It's not about what you don't want, it's about what you do want. We should be focusing on what we do want, not what we don't want.
Yeah. And the question of conscious contact with a higher power is like the ultimate graduate level assignment in that
Mm.
department. I mean, building it brick by brick. What do I believe? I mean, do I believe? I can say pretty quickly, I don't believe in the God of my childhood understanding. And I could
Mhm.
and spent a lot of years on explaining why. And sometimes,
Yeah.
uh, you know, till the wee hours of the morning at the bar. Kind of shaking my metaphorical fist at the hypocrisy of the Catholics and the blah blah blah
Oh
blah
my
blah.
gosh. Yeah, the hypocrisy. That's something
Right,
you hear a lot, right?
right.
I'm sure I've made
Um,
that argument myself, the hypocrisy of the church.
Nobody ever asked me, well, what do you believe? I didn't ask myself, what do I believe?
Right.
And then, so I think, though, at the very first place I went was, well, maybe this thing is just, um, there is no ultimate meaning. Maybe what you see is what you get. We're on a rock spinning around a fireball
There
in a
is no
void
meaning.
of darkness.
Hmm.
Consciousness is only organic, and it's extinguished when the brain dies. And
Oh God, that's depressing.
yeah, and and that's it. And you die, you go in the dirt, and you become ant food. And the rest of it is just like whistling in the dark past the graveyard. All spirituality is self-delusion to prevent the fear of staring into the abyss, which is reality.
Wow. Yeah, that is such a well, and you kind of said what I was going to circle back to, this idea of religion versus spirituality, because ultimately, like for me, and tell me if this was your experience, it's like, you have this rock bottom experience, and then it's like, okay, well, obviously my way's not working, or you have like a spiritual experience, and God is undeniable, and then it leaves you questioning. But I think that is where the magic happens. Like my life just totally crumbled. I hit rock bottom, and then the questions started, and it was like one question led to another. It's like, well, my question started with drinking. It's like, well, when do you become an alcoholic? When do you cross the line? What is an alcoholic? And then one question led to another, to another. And then before I knew it, like I was on this quest for deeper meaning, because it was never, I found out later, it was never about the alcohol. It was about all the other stuff compelling me. Right. But it was like when you hit that rock bottom, it's like you crack open. Then that's like when it's like that's when spirituality can enter, is through the chink in the armor type of thing. And I really had to go back to this, you know I was like, do I go back to religion, or is there something else? And I think the something else is what ultimately has fulfilled me and helped with this idea of the conscious contact and miracles. I like legit miracles have happened in my life since just being open to the idea.
I love the map of the 12 steps for it too. They're so
Yeah,
brilliant. I mean, they're borrowed from all sorts of other uh, teachings and traditions.
yeah, it's a great
And,
place to start.
yeah, my path has a lot of similarities with yours. And, to go back to kind of where I left off with that one idea, I know that there are many people that are certain that that's the ultimate reality. And I'm no longer driven to convince them out of that. And nor do I believe that myself now. Um, and the bridge between, for me, it was interesting. Um, it was like a voice inside my head that wasn't quite my own was saying, okay, well, so what about Jesus or Buddha or these other saints and mystics, that did um, these things and wrote about them and had others write about them? Were they one? Was that all made up? Or two, were they crazy? Um, I've done enough homework to satisfy my own
Conclusion is
curiosity. Yeah, that it wasn't made up. That they were
right.
historically real people, including Jesus. Um,
That's what I always tell my husband. He's like, "How do you know this?" And I go, "Well, think of Jesus like Benjamin Franklin. Like it's a historical figure. Like what about that? Can you think of it that way?" Or
well, that and for me also, what did they personally teach or experience or live? What? Go back to the source was kind of the call to me as much as possible. Um, Obviously, Jesus has been gone a long time.
yeah,
um, but and then um, try to make a connection. And I've had my own experiences, answered prayers, um, and miracles, if you want to call them that,
hmm
that have confirmed and built slowly, very slowly, more quickly now, my own knowing. And
right,
um, one of the things I love so much about the 12-step tradition is um, the invitation to find your own way.
right. Yeah, that is so important. I think because people don't typically want to be spoon fed. People value experience. Like you have to have your own like experience of like the magic of the universe. Like if you don't want to call it God, that's fine. But there are laws that the universe does work within. And for a lot of well, I'll speak for myself. For me, like I'm a science girl. I like the ideas of like the laws of the universe, but I also like the idea of I heard Carolyn Miss talk about God as law, but God is also personal. Like this, like the concept of love is an energy that um it feels that's what, like if I was going to boil it all down, it would be God is love. That's it. But love is also energy and it's creative, and you know what I mean, there's a lot of depth and meaning in that, and that was something I that was a place for me to start. And so often, sometimes all that's required is just an open mind and starting somewhere and then just start asking questions.
Absolutely. And seeing the answers, and for me, letting go of the tendency to discount the answers as coincidence, um, you know, th-
I
and
have a friend
begin
that
to,
calls them coincigods.
yeah, begin to open. That's a good bridge word. Begin to open the possibility that they're much more
Mhm.
than that.
Yeah, I mean, it is tempting to just like explain things away, but some things are just undeniable. But and if all things being equal, why not? Why not? There's this idea that God is or he isn't. And I've heard that if you have a problem with God, chances are you have a problem with someone else's God, and that's why I like that idea of redefining it for myself. And I just use the term God because you say God and everyone's kind of on board. Everybody kind of understands that it's sort of like this mystical, powerful, unexplained thing, right? Um, but as I have progressed in recovery, it's evolved. That the idea has evolved for me, and for me, I feel comfortable using words like universal source energy, that kind of thing, because I really like the like laws of attraction, or the laws around love, and a tithing, like what you put out comes back to you tenfold, like that kind of thing. It's like what you think about you bring about, like that is legit, like that's a thing. It's this idea of energy that like when you walk into a room and you could cut the tension with a knife, or you go to a concert and the room is just electric. It's like this flow of energy. It's like, have you ever talked to somebody that you could just feel their resistance, or you're talking to somebody and they're just like so sprung when they like you're like, oh, you like me, don't you? It's like, you know what I mean? It's like this thing of energy is like palpable, and I feel like that's how God shows up in like these trippy, surprising ways.
So are you familiar with a guy named Joe Dispenza, Arlena?
I am, yeah.
So I'm listening to one of his books right now, and
Which
he,
one?
I believe it's called Change Your Mind, Change Your Life. Um,
Oh my gosh, is that the title of the book?
I think that's what it's called.
That's that's kind of like the tagline of my self-esteem class. It's like, well, it's
You
like
should
change your
listen to it.
beliefs.
Yeah,
Yeah.
same thing.
Yeah.
So there's a stretch I listened to really recently where he is having an imaginary conversation with somebody who's skeptical, and essentially talks about, the conversation goes back and forth. Okay, so what is your body made up of? Well, organs and skin and bones and tissues and that kind of stuff. And what are they made up of? Well, cells. And what are they made up of? Um, Molecules. And what are they made of? Atoms. And what are they made
Atoms,
of? Subatomic
positive and
particles. And
negative.
what are they made of? Well, and so you get down to the very essence,
Hmm.
and the essence is something that we can't see with our senses. We have to trust the scientists who have discovered it, with more sensitive instruments than our eyes and ears and so forth. And what the basic building blocks of everything are the same, and it's mostly energy. When you get down
Positive and
to,
negative energy. Yeah.
well, yeah, there, matter isn't solid. It appears to be because our senses are limited in
Right.
perception. So the basic building block of everything is energy. And then he talks about energy. These systems are self-regulating just in the human body. You and I don't have to sit here and remind our hearts to beat. We're not going to keel over dead if we forget to say heartbeat. The same
Right.
with the breathing, the same with healing, the same with the orbiting of the planets.
Hmm.
And at the basic level, he says it much more eloquently than I do, but his uh, thesis that ties it together is, how could this be anything but love? This
Mm.
this energy of self-organizing perfection.
Right. Yeah.
And he calls it at the basic level the quantum field.
Right.
So there's a different label for what some call God. My
Hmm.
belief, my practice, my hope is to um, converse in the language that resonates with the other person that I'm visiting with. Sort of like a mockingbird sings songs of all different kinds of birds.
Hmm.
Because Arlena is a name that's yours, but it doesn't anymore describe you than the word God describes the concept, the
Oh, I
entity that we're
love
talking
that.
about, right? So
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah. Yeah. My name doesn't really capture the essence of
no,
me.
no, it's a useful pointer when people are wondering, oh yeah,
Yeah,
I
if you
know that
know. Yeah.
person. Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Oh, that's really good. I love that. Yeah. I always use that, explanation of like energy when it comes to funny quick side story. I was taking all these physiology anatomy classes for nursing school, and I didn't want to take the chemistry class. So they said that if I studied and took the place, like you could place out of it. And so I applied everything that I knew about relationships and everything that I learned in the program to chemistry, which sounds weird. But at the end of the day, it's, for instance, I learned that molecules or atoms actually were made up of positive and negative particles, protons and neutrons, positive and negative charges, right? And I used
And
so
like attracts like, right?
like attracts like, but like two negative charges that are stuck together, that's a covalent bond. And I related that to like codependency. So like that's how I got through chemistry,
You've had some
is that
covalent bonds in your life, haven't you?
I've had some covalent
Yeah, me
bonds.
too.
Yeah. I thought that was kind of funny. It was like I was able to, I didn't really think of chemistry as, being like relationships, but it was really uncanny. I was able to place out of chemistry just from what I was able to like relate everything. I mean, it's kind of a weird thing, but it is so important to understand how like everything kind of boils down to this positive and negative energy. And it's interesting how what you focus on expands. And so, you know, a lot about what I talk about and I teach is about how to use the laws of the universe. The laws of the universe were set up to support us, but we typically use them in the exact opposite way. Like we weren't really taught, you know, and I think, you know,
Well, and it goes back to this whole notion of putting your energy um, into what you do want, into
yes,
what you do
yeah,
believe,
yeah.
into what you
How do
want
you want
more
to
of.
feel?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and less into what you're against.
So what's interesting to me and what I love about a lot, I think most religions, took a bunch of religious studies classes too, but it was interesting to me how every religion has a way to address guilt, right? Like the whole concept of, you know, you mentioned Jesus. It's like the whole concept of Jesus was he came to relieve you of your guilt. It's like every human being has like this core feeling of guilt that we carry around. And I feel like it's the guilt that blocks us from being able to receive the good stuff, right? We got negative messages coming at us from all sides. And it's just so interesting that that was the whole purpose of Jesus, was to absolve us of our, you know, sin is actually an archery term. It means that you miss the mark. It's not like something that God wants to condemn you for and make you, you know, burn in the fiery pits of hell for all eternity. That doesn't never made sense to me. But sin is like, oh, you just missed the mark. You know, let's redirect you've already been forgiven. You know, who would you be if you weren't guilty? What would you be able to receive? You know, what is the block between you and receiving goodness? We put all these blocks between us and goodness. Oh, if I'm the right size, if I have the right man, if I make the right money, if I have the right job, then I'll be happy. But the whole idea is like, oh, you could just be happy now. If you have that conscious contact with your higher power, it's like, oh, you can give all the stuff you struggle with, you just give that to God and let God be God. And oh, you mean I can just be happy now? It's like, oh, I'm not guilty. It's like, obviously we, you know, take responsibility for our actions and we do our best and blah, blah, blah. But I thought it was so interesting, just the idea of, oh, Jesus came to absolve you of you don't have to be guilty. You can just be happy. What do you think about that?
I think it's perfect. Forgive. Two things come to mind. So the
Mhm.
forgiveness piece. Um, I
Self-forgiveness, mostly.
well, both really. I think that when I forgive myself, I'm better able, and I'm only able then to forgive truly others. Um,
Right. Yeah.
Same with love. That the notion that that I love others better than I love myself is an egotistical illusion, or that I forgive others better than I forgive myself. I think is the same thing. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it's this sneaky little idea that um, that I'm holier because I'm harder on myself, or some nutty thing like that. I think Jesus.
That's an idea, though. I mean, people really
It's a
adopt
real
that.
thing. Yeah, I know.
It's a thing. Yeah.
I
Let me be
know.
harder on myself than that's pride
Yeah,
in reverse, isn't
it
it?
is. It is.
Yeah.
Um, I think it's a mathematical impossibility. I think that that we treat others the way we treat ourselves, and we treat ourselves the way we treat others.
I always thought of it like you can't escape the same measuring stick that you judge others by.
Yeah, nor can you not whack others with the one you judge yourself by.
Right.
It
Yeah.
may be more silent, but I know I've kind of experimented on this with myself. When I am able to kindly laugh at my own foibles, then I'm better able to kindly laugh at other people and their errors. Um,
Hmm.
and when I'm critical of myself, um, then I'm going to find a way to be critical of somebody else too.
Absolutely.
It's
So do you have a like a daily process to, because what I'm thinking is that, you know, we go through life and there are times when we are really critical of ourselves or critical of others. It's like this, you know, it's like the inner critic kind of creeps back in. It's like you can be like spiritual for a minute and pray and meditate and be like all zen and everything. And then, you know, I think it's unrealistic to be able to maintain that kind of zen all the time for more than 10 minutes, if I'm honest. Um, so do you, how do you come back to center? How do you stay in balance? Do you have like a daily practice for maintaining that conscious contact? What is your
I do.
practice for?
I
Okay.
do. So, so in the morning, you know, after I've had a coffee and looked at email and the news and that kind of stuff, um, I have um, about a half an hour sort of ritual of practice that I do. Um, I have some spiritual reading that I do right now. There's um, a daily email that I get from a teacher that I really like a lot, and so that's always part of it. His
Who's
name
that?
is
Oh,
Eknath Easwaran. Um,
oh,
he is departed now. Um, he was born in India, came to the United States in the 1960s, and I think he taught literature at one of the Ivy League schools. I forget which, but he also taught meditation, and he has this 8-pointed path that he teaches. And he's written a number of books. Um, Key to his on his path are um, having a mantra, which I do, um, and
is that a
practicing.
secret thing? Having a mantra? Is that a secret thing?
It's not for me. Um,
What's yours?
Mine is the name Jeshua.
Okay.
So that is um, what Jesus's Aramaic name would have been. You know, again,
Oh,
in the spirit of going to the source, right?
okay.
Um, Jesus is an English translation of Jeshua.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
and
I did not know
his,
that.
yeah, yeah. And Eastwarin's meditative practice, what he taught and what he practiced was what he called passage meditation. Um, and essentially, it involves memorizing a passage, a prayer, scripture, Rumi poem, whatever you find meaningful. He's got a few books with ideas in them, um, and then reciting it silently, ever more slowly, and letting other thoughts just sort of drift down like those little particles in a snow globe. So that ideally, there's intervals where there's nothing but the prayer,
Mm.
in consciousness. And I'll do that for 20 minutes. Now, I've sort of modified it a little bit for myself where I prayerfully kind of tune in and kind of internally bow, um,
Mm.
my um, yielding ego is the idea. And
Is it like a surrender?
yeah, and then opening the heart center, to receive, and then also give and transmit,
Mhm.
and opening the third eye so that um, inspiration can come, if
Mm.
there is some to come. And
Right.
I practice that for about 20 minutes, and that's my primary means. I continue to want to add a second practice in the evening, and I have at times, and currently I'm not. So I'll put that aspiration out there that I want to do another um, bit in the evening of the same thing.
Like a 20, okay, the same thing.
Yeah,
It's hard because it seems like the evening, and I've thought of that too, but it seems like it's harder in the evening because the day ends at different times every day. Like I'm a
yeah,
creature of habit
yeah,
that for some
exactly.
reason the evening is different every night.
I like to anchor my routines to other routines, and it's
Right.
harder, when there isn't one. So
Absolutely. Yeah. Oops, sorry, there's my dog.
who's
Do
pretty
you hear?
cute, by the way. Yeah,
He is cute. He's on my Instagram frequently, in case anyone is interested.
And your Facebook.
Oh my gosh. So, just a little side note, my son plays a song from a band called Tool, and it's sort of instrumental, and the dog howls at it every time. It is hilarious on cue. So
You might have to publish that.
I know I recorded it today. I'm
Okay.
totally going to publish it. But now he's, okay, he's outside yelling at the kids. So that's always fun. Okay, so all right, sorry, I digress. So morning practice, wanting to add an evening practice. I just added a new evening practice with a girl that I work with. I came across this idea of, a tool to build self-esteem is to write a nightly short self-gratitude list and sort of acknowledge the things that you did right that day, because it's very easy to think about the things that you did do right. So anyway, I shared it with her and she's like, oh, I'll totally do it. I was like, how about we do this? Text me when you're done. She's 2 hours, we're in different time zones. So she texts me when she's done, which gives her some accountability, but it's also my prompt to do it in the evening, which is super. So if you have a sponsee, assign them
That's
homework
beautiful.
and that will be your prompt.
I will. Yeah, I got to practice what you preach, right?
Yeah, listen, I don't ever assign homework without doing it my damn self, because
Yeah.
typically there's this idea that you teach what you need to learn. And I think that's the whole idea behind sponsorship, right? Or
Yeah.
working with others or
Yeah.
being in service. You find yourself saying the exact thing you needed to hear. And it's like, oh, the answers are within us, and they come out when we give them away, like from this energy of love and wanting to help somebody out of their suffering. We find ourselves saying the exact things. So we have the answers inside us, but it's just magical how it comes out when we're trying to be in service of someone else.
It's so faith building for me and affirming when I do
Mm-hmm.
that and I notice that. Yeah, I totally get that.
Me too. And then now she and I have like this love fest going on. It's like I'm so grateful for her. And it I've started noticing things that I do right during the day, thinking, oh, I'm going to add this to the list at night. So I'm like starting to, it's man, this is
That's
working. It's
cool.
working.
And
Yeah.
the next thing is you're going to be thinking of things like in the morning. What am I going to do today that I'll then put on my list tonight?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I'm super obsessed. Have you ever heard of Abraham Hicks?
Yes.
Obsessed with Abraham Hicks. And I had been aware, and I didn't, like, how sometimes you just don't attach to things. Like I didn't attach to it. I was like, oh, that's interesting. Whatever. Next. But for whatever reason, it's just hitting me so hard right now. It's like all laws of attraction stuff, but it's really helping me manage negative thinking in the sense that, I have a practice for addressing negative feelings. Tara, I think, did we talk about Tara Brock's rain meditation before?
We did. Yeah.
Yeah. So for those who don't know, RAIN stands for, it's a meditation process where you recognize your feelings, you allow them some space, you do a little kind of curious investigation, like, where is it in my body? What is this about? What is this feeling trying to teach me? And then N is about nurturing. It's like, give to your inner child what you would have, wish you would have had when you were little and you had a hurt feeling or something. And so that's been my process really for a while, to resolve negative feelings, because I'm not trying to pretend like they don't exist. I was taught early on, what you resist persist, right? So you want to acknowledge them, feel them, but then you want to process them to resolution. And so I was super into Abraham Hicks because it's all about focus on what you want and align your energy with what it is that you're trying to attract and all that stuff. But I had like an attack of fear this week. And, it's my knee jerk now after so many years of recovery to reach out and ask for help. So I reach out to my mentor, I ask for help, and she reminded me of this amazing prayer about giving my fear to God. I'm going to try to find it real quick, but I said that prayer, and it allowed me to get back to that place of being positive again, right? Because I was, okay, here's the prayer. It says, use me, God, show me how to take who I am, who I want to be, and what I can do, and use it for a purpose greater than myself. And that was like my fear prayer. It's like sometimes I get overwhelmed and frustrated and feel lost. Like I don't know what to do with all this fear. Then I'm afraid I have all this fear and I'm going to attract negativity to me. But it was really interesting that once I was able to be reminded that I could give this away, that I went right back to, oh, that's right. I can focus on what I'm grateful for. I can focus on the good feelings. I have a gratitude list of things, reasons I can feel good. And so when I get like all jammed up, I have this resource list basically to go to of evidence of why
The
I can
toolkit.
be, yeah, yeah, like real evidence. So,
So this leads me to kind of the understanding frontier that I'm um, moving through right now. I mentioned Joe Dispenza earlier,
love
and
him.
he's, in that book, it's very much um, similar to what you described with Abraham Hicks,
Mm.
in that, his message is, and there's other teachers that echo the same thing. And there's,
So many
yeah, yeah, yeah.
teachers. Yeah.
That see what it is, um, that the eventuality that you want to make real, um, clearly, and to um, have the positive, loving um, belief, energy, that you would have, that you will have, when it is real, in
Mhm.
advance, you know,
Yeah.
in effect, to draw it to yourself. Um, and so, I'm in the beginning um, stages of practicing that with some specifics, but it sort of begs the question for me: okay, is it that pure and that simple? And if that's the case, then um, people that have really terrible, calamitous things in their life, did they draw that to themselves? And I can't um, believe that. So then it's like, okay, well, so what's the rest of the story? God, quantum field, um, divine mystery. Help me understand um, a little better.
Is it sort of, is the question, why do bad things happen to good people kind of a thing?
Well, um, but more than that, um, I mean,
I mean, I only ask because I struggle with that myself.
yeah, yeah. I mean, that's part of it. It's just like, and so the partial answer that's come to me so far is that I'm not individual like I think I am, nor are you, nor is anybody else.
Mm.
That it's in a way that an individual um, can't comprehend. Um, it's a collective process. It's a collective creation, um, and so that I can sort of individually attract some um, things into my life, desirable or positive or negative or whatever. But there are energies, beyond my capacity, beyond my control, and beyond my understanding. Um, and that, um, yet there is still that unifying, underlying everything, call it love.
Hmm.
So, I mean, it doesn't feel very articulate, it feels more unformed than formed, but it's the sort of best answer that I have to that big question so far.
Yeah, there are definitely lots of unanswered questions, but I just feel like it's important to just go on the journey and start asking the questions. You know, I love the whole purpose
Yeah.
of your podcast of,
Yeah.
hey, let's explore this. Let's talk about it. You know, let's start asking some hard questions. And you have a very analytical mind, and I love your conversations that you have on your
Thanks.
podcast. You know, you just really have a way of, guiding the conversation. So I want to be sure that we'll leave a link for that in the show notes. Could I trouble you to send me link, or at least the names of some of the people that you mentioned? There was the daily email that you get of the guy. I
Yeah, yeah,
said
yeah,
his
sure
name.
will. Uh-huh.
I have no hope of spelling that. That's something I'm not going to be attracting through the laws of attraction.
I will.
We did not get blessed with the spelling gene in my house. I have a son who can spell anything, and the rest of us we're just not that's not happening. But yeah, so if
So
you
I
could
resonate
send
with your
me.
son. I won the spelling bee many times.
Did
Um,
you
the,
really?
the other thing that I'll make mention of that is my main material for study right now is a book called The Way of Mastery,
Okay, that
which
sounds
I will.
familiar. Who is that?
Well, are you familiar with the Course in Miracles?
Oh my gosh, I love the Course in Miracles.
Okay, and so what do you know about the origin story of the Course in Miracles?
It's almost like the Abraham Hicks thing, where it's like somebody is channeling. Is that right?
Right, channeling Christ,
Oh,
um, and Helen Schuckman, I think, was the woman who transcribed um,
Course in Miracles.
Course in Miracles, yeah, along with a couple of others. And I don't remember um, the person's name, but the Way of Mastery is the same thing. It's
Okay.
more recent and for me more accessible. So it's I think
Oh,
35 lessons um,
okay.
that were apparently taught by the masters um, of the day to Jesus, to Jeshua, and that
Okay.
he then shares for anyone wanting to follow the path.
Well, I'm going to try to channel me some Jesus and for this book I'm writing. How do people tap into that? That's amazing. I mean, I've heard of this
Right?
heard of this concept of people channeling and writing these amazing books. It's an interesting idea, though, right?
It is. It is indeed. I think be careful what you wish for and pray for. My sense is that you've got to reduce yourself um,
Oh,
enough,
damn it.
right, to
And my
allow.
ego's too big. I don't know. I don't know. Listening to all this Abraham Hicks and what I really want to write. So I've been writing a book draft and I'm like, okay, it's gonna be a phenomenon. let's rebuild self-esteem for women and for women after addiction, which, I guess could be applied to everybody. But
Well, so maybe this is channeled through me. Maybe it's just me. I don't know. Whatever. But I feel inspired, maybe slightly compelled to share uh, a little notion about this topic of self-esteem.
oh, let's
May
hear
I?
it.
Okay.
Please.
So I think um, a real key couple of ingredients in the recipe are to one, um, make very intentional promises to yourself um, about the things that matter to you, whatever they are, whether it's changing a relationship, changing a
Mm,
diet, changing a spiritual practice, changing um, a way of thinking, and then to keep them. Keep the promises you make to yourself. And then you can't help but have like oak tree sized self-esteem.
so that can be tricky though, right? Because
It is. It's damn
like
hard. It's damn
that's so
hard.
hard. Like, and so what happens when you break a promise to yourself? I mean, because
Then
a
you
lot of
pick yourself up and you try again, and you get
you
more
just keep
careful
trying.
about the promises you make.
Yeah,
Because I
that's
think
interesting.
otherwise, Arlena, if it's not, to me, if self-esteem is more of a process of mental affirmation than it is a byproduct of living in accordance with um, your own principles,
How
then
you
it's
feel.
then it's kind of like one of those um, storefronts in the old movies, where there was nothing behind it.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Like a movie set.
yeah, yeah, where it looks
Mm-hmm.
great from the outside, you know. Um, and I think
Well,
probably some people, especially famous people, um, who have um, a lot of public acclaim and adulation, and they look great, and they have a lot of money. I think those are great examples of the kind of self-esteem that's like a hot air balloon. There's nothing inside but hot air, and that
Yeah.
when the public turns for whatever reason, um, their self-esteem wilts.
Yeah, so that to me is like external versus internal validation.
Yeah, exactly. And
Yeah,
it's the internal kind to me, again, is really rock solid if it's based
yeah.
on, um, like for example, if you have uh, a principle of being kind to people, no matter
Hmm.
what, and then you go out and you are kind to people when others are watching, but you're mean, when it's a smelly street person and nobody's watching, um,
Hmm.
then your self-esteem is going to suffer because you didn't live
Right.
up to your principle.
Exactly. Yeah. So part of the class that I teach, it's, we'll get an idea. It's like, let's get an idea of what you do want to attract in your life, right? We'll talk about laws of attraction. We talk about what it is that you do want. We talk about beliefs and how to change beliefs, like Joe Dispenza does. Where they come from, how they're developed. Belief is just a thought you've repeated enough times to that it becomes ingrained in your subconscious. And so we do a process of, identifying limiting beliefs, and there's a process to reframe those, and then the affirmations. And then there's like a forgiveness process where, I do a guided meditation where I ask, these women that take my class to envision their, 4-year-old little girl that's still inside there who needs you to be the adult, the protector. Maybe we've abandoned you, and we're going to take care of you from here on. And so that's sort of like the self-promising thing. Not something specific, like I promise you I'm not going to eat the ice cream at night and then I'm in the fridge at 10 p.m. with the chocolate sauce. It's a thing. Um, but it's this sort of like, I promise I'm going to do my best to take care of you. Sort of, maybe that's like a general promise. And this meditation that we do at the end of the self, like, I forgive you. Like they list all the things that they feel guilty about. And then there's like this forgiveness process that is just, and I feel like we all sort of crave this forgiveness. We carry all this guilt. So it's like releasing the blocks to receiving the abundance. It's sort of like what Joe Dispenza and Abraham Hicks talk about. It's like we get this inspired thought, from the ether that this is what we want. But we then be like, oh, but I don't deserve it. I'm not worthy. I'm not deserving. And so building the self-esteem is sort of like just this process. And then the end of the class that I teach is about boundaries for yourself, how to set boundaries with others, how to do that relationship shaping, because everyone evolves. The funny thing about early in recovery, how we change and evolve so much through recovery that our boundaries are always changing, right? Sometimes I don't know where my boundaries are until I cross them, where I'm like, ah, and mostly for me these days, it's about, um, expecting myself to do something that I shouldn't, like, for instance, figure it out is not a slogan. you know like thinking I can handle my own fear. Sometimes I need to give it away. That's why my mentor gave me the prayer. It's like, oh, don't forget to give it away. That's not your job. It's like, oh, thank you so much for reminding me. Developing a support system, part of the class is so it's like I feel like all these things together is like, a process, in a group to build self-esteem so that we can sort of operate like on a higher level. Like everybody kind of has like this thermostat, right? You don't get too high, you don't get too low. You kind of live within this, you know, area. I'm making the block hand motions on a podcast, but we sort of live in this little, so if you want to raise your level, it requires support. It requires a little bit of intentional help to sort of change the way you think and change your beliefs and stuff. So in my mind, that's how I've, reestablished my self-esteem after
That's beautiful.
definitely with God's help.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And no doubt you're living very differently, and your example
Oh yeah.
is modeling what you're describing.
I find that I
So,
cycle through the fear faster. I cycle through self-pity faster.
yeah,
I cycle through anxiety faster. Like the rain, it's a common,
yeah,
I'm so high maintenance. It's like my morning routine. Like I'd have to do the rain music and writing and the prayer, meditation, journaling, helping somebody else. Well, I'm exhausted by the end of the day. But anyway, it's a beautiful way to live. I think
it's
I have
amazing,
fun
isn't
on,
it?
we have
Yeah, I
fun on
mean,
the journey, don't we?
yeah, and sometimes it's fun to think about if present day you were able to go back in time and talk to
Mm.
previous you and say, hey, guess what we're going to be doing in 26 years or whatever, and how much we're going to love it. Previous you would have thought, shut up.
I can't
Oh,
wait to get there.
no,
Life is good.
you're nutty. I'm going to go have a drink. You live in delusion.
You know what's
Previous
funny is when I was a
previous
little
me would have
girl.
thought this was stupid.
All right. When I was a little girl, I had like these illusions of grandeur that I thought I was going to be something amazing when I grew up. And then somebody early in recovery told me that children who are neglected often think that they're destined for greatness. I don't know what that is. Maybe that's a survival mechanism. I don't know. And I was like, oh crap. And I let that idea keep me small for a really long time. And then I came to realize, oh, that was a sick person that told me that. Why would I why would I latch onto that as a belief? Like, oh, maybe that's true. It like latched onto my worst fear. But yeah, I feel like everybody has the potential and capacity, not just to do great things, but like Mother Teresa, there are no great things, just small things done with great love. So
Yeah, and I think the next frontier for me is continuing to shrink, um, the ego, the matness, um, so that I can be more the conduit. Um, that you're hoping that you can with inspiration for your book. I mean,
right.
it's it's a lifelong thing. Who knows how much more we'll get done? But
Tell me about the inspiration for your podcast, The Conscious Contact. What do you hope that the Conscious Contact will bring to people? Is it more along the lines of helping people come to their own conclusions about a higher power?
ultimately, I would really like to be part of a bigger conversation with other people around the world wanting to do the same sort of thing.
Mhm.
That's the big dream. Um, Regardless of how many it touches. Yeah, what I want to do, Arlene, I think that to me, the main reason for my existence is the same as the main reason for your existence, is the same reason for existence, the material existence, which is um, for this thing called love, this thing called God, this thing called Christ mind, enlightenment, to um, to to be made matter. Let me try to rephrase that. I think our purpose for being here is collective enlightenment.
Mm-hmm. I like that.
And
Enlightenment meaning,
the literal sense where we become the light.
hmm, I like that.
And I want to be a little particle of making more of that happen.
Well, you are certainly doing your part, and I know you have had, some great guests already, and I look forward to many more of the conversations that you're going to be recording. I'm so happy you're doing the podcast.
Yeah, thanks so much for helping me get it going, and thanks for for this conversation today, so that more people can know a little bit about it. And
Yeah, we'll have to continue the conversation. I know that you have a lot to share. And tell me again how long you've been abstinent.
36 years.
Oh my God, 36?
Yeah. Yep.
Wow, that is impressive.
Thank you. Yeah.
36. You were already 10 years. I got sober. I'm 26. You're already 10 years sober when I showed up. That's amazing.
I think I'm about 10 years older than you too, though. So it's just
Oh,
a
so we
matter
got
of
sober at the same time. You were
living
about
longer.
25?
1983. Yeah. It was my 24th birthday.
Whoa, that's early. Yeah, I got sober at 25. So that's still, I mean, we got sober. Oh gosh, we missed a lot of drama.
Well, I probably would have been dead, the
way you were going.
Yeah, I really, because I was driving drunk a lot, and
me too.
I was starting to get into burglary, and just
scandalous.
Yeah, right. Or I might have been and I was selling cocaine. Dead or in prison.
Oh my God.
Or in prison and then dead.
Oh my goodness. You just seem like such a nice guy now.
Thank you. It's been a long road.
It's been a long road. Well, Matt, thank you so much for being a guest. I'm sure we'll have to do this again sometime on my podcast or yours, but thank you so much for your thoughtful input and for your podcast, helping people to come to their own conclusions about how to develop that conscious contact. It's a big question. So I think it's a great place to start.
Thanks for having me, Orlena. It's been a blessing.
We'll talk soon. Click. Okay, that was amazing.
So what's next for you today?
Can I just tell you, I've had such a miraculous day. It started out with, I manifested the bunny. Did I tell you about the rabbit? I was listening to Gabby Bernstein, and she was like, oh, you can choose a spirit animal and don't question what it is. Just, she likes owls. I have a little owl up there. I didn't get it because of her, but I was like, okay, all right, universe, send me a spirit animal. And then a white rabbit came to mind. And I was like, that's weird. It was just like the Matrix. Remember Neo was follow the white rabbit. I was like, boy, that's weird. Whatever, it's fine. And then since then, like white rabbits, and maybe it's because I, planted that idea, look for the rabbit, like whatever you focus on, I'm like, am I doing this? Is it who knows? I don't care. So I'm listening to all this Abraham Hicks stuff, and they're talking about manifesting. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to be manifesting like an amazing book. I want to manifest my house getting paid off, all this stuff. And I thought, well, let's just start small. There's been a bunny that shows up in my yard when I go outside to meditate in the morning. And I do like a whole thing outside in the morning. But I scared it unintentionally. And I was like, oh, I haven't seen the bunny.
Like,
and I go,
bunny.
I know, I'm so sorry, bunny. I didn't mean to scare it. I got up to look to see where it went, and it saw me, and it darted away, and I didn't see it for like 3 days. So I was sitting there, and I go, I'm going to try to manifest the bunny. I'm just going to try to see if I can use the laws of attraction. And I'm like, into listening to the Abraham Hicks, it was just like, think about like how you feel when you have what you want. And so I was thinking about the joy that I feel when I see this stupid bunny. And I'm like, I love the bunny. Thank you so much for showing up, bunny. And the fucking rabbit came like 2 seconds later. I was like, oh my God. Thank you, God, for paying off my house.
Think how good that's going to feel.
But one of the exercises, isn't that, but okay, so that was
cool.
Like, that was my first first thing. Start small. And then, I do a lot of work to support other women. I do a lot. And then, so I'm like, yesterday I was all in self-pity. I'm like, who's going to help me? I got hit with 3 things in like rapid succession. So I told you that Omar was like bowing out. And then I got
which is probably going to be a blessing in disguise. Maybe.
I know it is. But my ego was like, ugh. But I'm grateful because it wasn't meant to be. I was trying to force something to happen that wasn't meant to be. And even my sponsor was like, this thing with Omar, you've had so many problems. You should, I have like an interaction with Stephanie Covington, who wrote A Woman's Way Through the 12 Steps 25 years ago. It's been like this phenomenon.
Hmm.
And she and I are, uh, well, I reached out to her. She was on the podcast, and it was really cool. And so I'm going to be doing a recording of my self-esteem class, and I'm going to send it to her, and she's going to air it closed circuit on the women's federal prison system. Super excited about that. Kind of carrying on my dad's work. My dad used to teach ESL and GED stuff in the jails
Hmm.
before he
That's
died.
very cool.
That was pretty cool. Where was I going? Oh, so I'm writing this book, I'm doing all this stuff, and I'm like, oh my God, who's going to help me? Oh, the tax bill. I got hit with three things. It was Omar, it was the tax bill. On the 14th, I got the email notification from the accountant that I owed $23,000 that was due the next day. Ow. So, but COVID happened. Remember, I've been complaining to you for all this time, like, oh, I want God to remove me from this job. Well, because of COVID happened, I got like a $30,000 commission check one month. Right.
So take your
So
time about letting go of the job, maybe.
I know, right? But it was just like God showing off that like amazing things are happening. Like I was able to pay the tax off. I still have a whole bunch of money in the bank, and like it made zero difference. And so I was just like, okay, I could be grateful about. But it was like the tax bill, it was Omar, and then something else happened.
The bunny.
Oh, I haven't. My boss left. So my boss and the VP are forming a new strategic alliance team, and so I have no boss right now. I have a new VP, and I was all jacked up about it. Turns out he's like 10 times better than my old VP. I just met him yesterday for the first time, but I was really scared. Like I just got hit in rapid succession with all this stuff, and so I had an attack of fear. And that's when I talked to my sponsor, and she gave me that prayer. And then last night I was thinking, I do a lot to help other people. Who's gonna be there for me, like with the book? And so this woman that I had connected with, oh, she might be a good guest for your podcast too, by the way. I'll do an email intro. Her name is Gigi. She's a PhD from Stanford.
Oh,
She,
perfect.
she wrote a book.
She in recovery?
Yeah, sober a long time. Intro, Matt, to Gigi. She wrote a book. She'll want to talk about that. But anyway, so
What's your book about?
I don't know. She sent it to me. I need to read it.
Yeah, especially if you want her to help you with yours.
I know, right? Well,
So what's her name?
Gigi, I think her real name is, I'll do an email intro, but her name, it should be right here on top of my email pile because she reached out to me this morning. Her name is Georgia Langer, and Georgia is spelled Georgea. What's the name of her book? I'll do an email intro. She turned out to be such a nice lady.
Langer.
Langer. Yeah. She turned out to be such a nice lady. And at the end of the conversation, she's like, if you need any help, even if you want someone to talk you off the ledge, you can call me. And I was like, oh my God, it's just showing off now. I was like, is that the, it's just amazing. I mean, that just was this morning. I manifested a bunny and a teacher that has a PhD from Stanford.
Who has written a book and who wants to help you write yours?
She does. Isn't it amazing?
Yeah.
That's good, right?
Yeah, heck yeah.
Oh, man. Have you heard of Shane Raymer from That Sober Guy podcast?
I've heard of that podcast, but so that's the guy that hosts it?
Yes, Shane
Okay.
Raymer. Okay, this is my last God story for you. It's such a miracle. I was like, so Shane Raymer is somebody that has this podcast. I reached out to him 3.5 years ago when I first started my recovery podcast. And I don't remember what I reached out to him for. I don't know if I was trying to get him to be a guest, or I think we exchanged emails. I don't remember. I felt neutral about it. Like I wasn't mad at him. I wasn't like excited about him. I was like, okay, whatever.
You're just doing some networking attempts.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't remember what I reached out to him for, but anyway, I met someone else, and he was like, "Hey, let's exchange emails." Not Shane, somebody else. This guy Dennis. It started his podcast, and he was like, "Hey, do you have anyone that you can introduce me to?" And I was like, "Yeah, I can introduce you to a few people." And he goes, "I'll introduce you to a few people too." So he sends me an email intro to Shane Raymer, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, we've met before!" And like, yeah, let's talk on. I was like, "You inspired me on the podcast 3.5 years ago. I have 114 episodes now." And he's like, "Well, that's great." So we agreed to speak, and then when we get on the phone, he's like, "Where are you?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm in the Boise, Idaho area." He goes, "Get out." He goes, I'm going to be there in 2 weeks. We're looking for a house that's like 15 minutes from me." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, what is happening?" It was just, I mean, we didn't speak for 3.5 years, and then we get connected 2 weeks before he's going to be here with his family. I was like, "Whoa, that is amazing." I was like, "God showed
That's
up
so cool.
today."
That is
Yeah,
way
so I'm
cool.
really looking forward to meeting him in person, him and his family as they do their house shopping.
So I love that stuff, and I have my own, you know, kind of versions have it on a regular basis. They're more lately just internal answers to questions like the one I posed. But
Uh-huh.
I got to confess, I still, and I'm confessing this to the quantum field, if you will,
Okay.
um, that I still have too much more than I want, but I think it's honest. Yeah, but thinking,
Mm-hmm.
and it's about the bad stuff, like I uh, I have visions and versions, like specific things that I would love to have happen. And
Do you have an example?
well, so yeah, so for one example, so my wife and I would love to get a motorhome and do some cruising. We
Ooh,
found a cool one that we really like, um, and we're working on getting the house paid off, and I think we're going to have it done, um,
wow.
within 12 months, and then we're
What? You're
going to,
gonna have your house paid off within a year?
yeah.
Oh, it's
Well,
amazing.
being 10 years
Congratulations.
older helps. Um,
Mm,
we've been at it a little longer, um,
yes.
um, and having it happen even sooner would be even better.
Mhm.
So there's one example of what I want. And this
Okay.
podcast
House
thing,
paid off. Hmm.
I would love to be in conversation with people like Richard Rohr and Tara
Who?
Brach, Richard
Oh
Rohr
yeah.
and Tara
Oh yeah.
Brach and Ken Wilber and, you know, um, Desmond Tutu. And I mean, to be really um, with heavyweights in this
Hmm.
conscious contact arena. I mean, so
Hmm.
there's another specific idea. Um, one of the things that the AA program makes clear is that um, we turn our will and our life over, right?
Hmm.
And this way of mastery.
Oh shit! I just realized we're still recording. Let me. Sorry.